Ms. Arias, please take the stand.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and counsel. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. I'm sure you are accustomed to delays, and your patience is appreciated. Mr. Nurmi, you may continue.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Arias, before lunch, we were talking about the time, a weekend, that you and some fellow members of Prepaid Legal were spending with Mr. Alexander, and that was his home. Is that right?
Yes.
You were talking about, you mentioned an individual by the name of Deanna. Did Deanna have a last name?
Reed.
Okay. And this Miss Reed, what was your understanding of who she was?
My understanding was that she was an ex-girlfriend.
An ex-girlfriend of Mr.
Travis.
Alexander's?
Yes, of Travis's. That she was somebody Travis had once been very serious with, that he was once in love with, and they were both in love, and they separated. A lot of the history I know is through Travis.
Okay.
I mean, all of it, really.
Okay,
And
well, that's
his
fine.
friends.
Were you instructed to act a certain way with Travis when Miss Reed was present?
Yes.
How was that?
He warned me that she was emotionally unstable and that she would freak out if she saw him with other girls or if he attempted to move on anytime he tried to date somebody.
Did you see, I take it, and maybe I'm incorrect, was this the first time you met Miss Reed was in December 2006?
It's the first time I saw her. I don't recall meeting her. He advised me to steer clear of her at his house. So I didn't, seize the opportunity to go introduce myself or anything like that.
Okay. These instructions, if you will, that were given to you regarding Miss Reed, was that some sort of constant dictate throughout the course of your relationship with Mr. Alexander?
Yes, the entire time, even after we eventually broke up.
Okay. Because you weren't boyfriend and girlfriend in December 2006, correct?
No, we were not.
Okay. In that regard, you mentioned, and we'll talk up into from the time you met Mr. Alexander to the time you were at his home in Mesa, 2006, for the first time, were you dating other people?
There were, I was asked out on a few dates. Some I turned down and one I accepted during that time.
Did Mr. Alexander know about these dates?
Yes, he knew about he knew about when I was asked, and I think I did tell him. I don't remember. It was a church member. I don't remember if I told him.
Okay. All right. Before we move past December 2006, based on what you're telling us earlier, there was no sexual interaction between you and Travis during this weekend.
No, there were insinuations after everyone went to sleep, but he seemed almost paranoid that. Sorry.
May we approach, Your Honor? We were talking about the fact that that no sexual interaction took place between you and Mr. Alexander, and you were explaining how he was paranoid about being caught. Is that right?
Yeah, he seemed hypervigilant about us having any physical contact, even just holding hands or hugging or anything like that.
What do you mean hypervigilant? Did you hold hands and things like that, but he was paranoid people might see it, or can you describe that for us?
Well, even after Deanna left and everyone, we all found our sleeping arrangements, Travis and I slept in the front room. He had 2 leather couches, brown leather couches, and I slept on one and he slept on the other. And there were other people sleeping in an adjacent family room, and then there were other people sleeping in the loft, and there were 2 ladies that were sleeping in his bed upstairs. Even after all the lights were out and it was dark, we were laying on the couch talking, and he had his hand laying like that, just off the couch, and I just put my hand out and just touched his fingers. Nothing erotic or anything, just being affectionate. And he kind of pulled away and sat up and looked around to see if anyone was awake, and then he just kind of turned over toward me, but didn't reach out anymore.
So based on your interaction with him over the weekend, you were left with the impression that he certainly didn't want anyone to know that you were involved in any way.
Objection, leading speculation.
Rephrase.
Based on this conduct, when he pulls his hand away out of fear of being seen, did that leave you with the impression that Mr. Alexander didn't want people to know that you were in any way intimately involved with him?
Objection, speculation. Maybe he didn't want to have sex with her.
Overruled.
Yes.
Were you there the weekend to have sex with Mr. Alexander?
No, it was a business trip. I was excited to see him because I liked him, but no, definitely not for that.
Were you hoping he might bend you over the bed and have anal sex with you?
No.
Now, you didn't have any physical or romantic contact with him this weekend because other people were there and he wanted to keep it a secret. That was your understanding.
Yes, well, there was one romantic gesture as I was leaving.
And where did that take place?
He walked me out to my car to load up the bags, or my luggage, and his friend Chris was sitting in their Lexus SUV on the street, and he was on the phone facing, I guess we were in the driveway, and he would have been facing west because he was parked up near the house. And my car was parked in the driveway. And after the trunk shut, he looked around and saw that Chris had his back to us, and he was on the phone, and he said, "Here, kiss me quick while no one's looking." And so we just kissed, it was a brief kiss, and that was it. And sorry.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. At this point in time, you had engaged in several, maybe a half dozen, maybe not quite a half dozen, instances of sexual contact with Mr. Alexander, right?
Yeah, well, how many did you say?
Well, around a half dozen, give or take, probably a few less.
Something close to that.
Okay. And he doesn't want anyone seemingly to know that you have any sort of relationship in December 2006. So my question to you then is, how did that make you feel?
I didn't give it too much thought. It didn't make me feel good, but it didn't make me upset. I just it's something I kept ignoring and putting out of my mind and just ignoring.
Okay. So you weren't mad at him?
No.
Did you ever think, at this point in time, I'm done with this guy?
Maybe not in the context that I think you're putting it.
Okay. Well, what context was it then? I mean, at this point in time, you didn't say, gee whiz, we're doing all this activity. He doesn't even want to hold my hand in public. It's time to end this?
It bothered me a little bit, but we talked about the status of our relationship the next day.
And based on that conversation, use the word status, what was the status of your relationship based on this conversation? To your understanding, what was the status?
After talking, I was encouraged to date other people.
And, we talked a moment ago about, how you were asked out on one date or asked out on a few dates before December. At this point in time, when you're going to Ehrenberg and all those things, were you of the mind that Mr. Alexander wasn't dating anyone else?
I had that impression. I found out it was false.
Okay. We'll talk about that in a bit. But in January of 2007, or after December 2006, excuse me, you said that you were encouraged to date other individuals.
Yes.
Okay. Was there a certain type of individual you were encouraged to date?
Yes, he wasn't specific that first time, but then he got more specific afterward.
Okay. Let me ask you this. Did you go on dates?
Yes.
Do you know, to your knowledge, did Mr. Alexander learn about these dates?
Yes.
And where were these, you were in, is this in December or is this in January of the following year?
I think it would have been January.
And where, you're still living in Palm, I got the sense that maybe you were moved out of your Palm Desert home by then, is that?
No, I stayed in Palm Desert until early May, I think.
Okay. So you were back in, did these dates take place in Palm Desert?
No,
Where did they take place?
Pasadena.
Okay. And was there one particular individual? Did you go on several dates?
I went on dates with 2 different individuals. Yeah, 2 official dates.
2 actual dates. And you mentioned Pasadena. You weren't living there. Why were these dates taking place in Pasadena?
I had a doctor's appointment in Pasadena, so there was a guy that I had met. He was sitting next to me at the Super Saturday event, the one that I was texting Travis at, and he was very lively, and he asked me out, not right away. He was talking to me, getting to know me during the event, and then said, I don't remember how he worded it, but maybe we should go out sometime.
And this Super Saturday that you met this particular individual, when did this take place?
It would have been the same date as the photographs, so November 11th, 2006.
And did this individual ask you out on the 11th of November 2006?
Yes, but nothing confirmed or concrete. He just threw it out there, and I said, okay, maybe, sure, you know.
Did you feel like it would have been, at that point in time, considering your relationship with Mr. Alexander, that it would have been inappropriate for you to date this individual?
Not just a date, I wouldn't have considered it inappropriate. I don't think so.
You would or wouldn't have?
I would not have if it was just a date.
Okay. So you run into this individual again down the road.
Yes.
You mentioned Pasadena. You have a date with this individual.
We agreed to meet in Pasadena.
Okay. And who was this person?
His name is Abe Abdulhadi.
And how many dates did you have with Mr. Abdulhadi?
Just one.
And you dated another individual, you said?
I went on what I thought was going to be a date. It turned out to be more platonic, and that was someone else.
And who was that?
His name is John.
John what?
Dixon.
Okay. So you said the date with Mr. Dixon was, if I heard you correctly, platonic, right?
He invited me to get lunch. We got sushi, we chit-chatted, I didn't get any vibes or major chemistry. We were just friendly, so that's the impression I was left with.
Okay. And the date with Mr. Abdulhadi, was that more, or I should say, was that a less platonic situation?
It developed into that, sort of, but, you know, I mean, I don't know, we were just on a date, so it was not, he wasn't as, I don't know how to put it. It was different from the lunch date that I had.
Did Mr. Alexander know of these dates?
Yes. He didn't know prior, but
Okay.
he knew afterward.
How did he know? Did you tell him?
I didn't answer my phone that night, so, because I went to hang out with John Dixon again, and it was again platonic. He wanted to show me.
Objection, she's not responsive.
Sorry, I get distracted.
Why were you with John Dixon again?
He invited me over to show me clips from a movie he was directing, and he just played some of those clips on his computer. watched some clips from Pirates of the Caribbean, and that was it. I think we might have hugged when I left. I don't remember.
And it was at this time, I believe you're telling us that Mr. Alexander called and you weren't able to take his call at that moment.
Yes.
Was he angry that you didn't respond to his call or weren't there to answer his phone call?
He wasn't angry, just inquisitive.
Okay. And that inquisition, if you will, led to you describing the fact that you were with Mr. Dixon.
Yes.
And how did that sit with Travis?
He wasn't warmly received. He didn't appear to get angry, but I could tell he was upset in the way he was, in his tone, his mood changed.
What about the date with Mr. Abduhadi? How did Travis come to learn of that date?
Same conversation, because both of those dates were on the same day in Pasadena.
Okay. Was his distaste for your date with Mr. Abduhadi, was it different than that with John Dixon?
Objection, substantial evidence. She didn't say he was distasteful. She characterized it differently.
Overruled.
Can you say that question again? I'm sorry.
I'm going to try. Was Travis angry about your date with Mr. Abduhadi?
It appeared to me, or it seemed to me, it was over the phone, so I didn't see him, but from the tone of his voice, he seemed upset.
Was that at a different level or different reaction than it was related to Mr. Dixon?
I think it was all sort of cumulative.
Well, you mentioned the fact that as far as being encouraged to date, you said that there were certain people, eventually you thought didn't matter what kind of person you were encouraged to date. Then you said later on you were encouraged to date a particular type of person. So what I was asking is there some difference between Mr. Abduhadi and Mr. Dixon that caused, to your understanding, extra anxiety with Mr. Alexander?
I think they were grouped the same because they weren't church members, and I was sort of reprimanded for that.
By Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
So it wasn't that they being Mr. Dixon and Mr. Abduhadi, were different from each other. The problem was, from your understanding, was that they were both not church members, and Mr. Alexander wanted you to only date church members.
Yes.
I gotta ask, at this point in time, you've been encouraged to date, why would you care, or why would you allow Mr. Alexander to have any input on who you dated?
I sort of felt that way when he said that. I'm thinking he can't tell me who to date. But he explained to me the importance of dating within the church, and it made sense to me, so I agreed with him.
You what?
I agreed with him.
Okay. So based on this conversation with Mr. Alexander, then you agree to him that you're not going to date outside the church. Is that what we're taking away from this?
I agreed with what he told me.
Okay. Now, the time period we're talking about was January 2007, and you told us that you and Travis officially became a couple in February of 2007, right?
Yes.
Okay. How did it go from you dating other people, him encouraging you to dating other people, to this relationship, this boyfriend and girlfriend label?
A lot of things happened in that 3-week period.
Well, let's talk about that. What happened from your perspective to get you from dating other individuals to being Travis's girlfriend?
Well, the first thing I did is he hung up on me that night. He was upset, and so it kind of jarred me a little bit. So I decided to write him an email, and I don't know why, but I felt like I was cheating on him, even though he had told me to date other people. I felt guilty about it, and so I expressed that to him. And while I was writing the email, he sent me a text message. I don't know if I can say what it said.
Well, you write in this email, and you're expressing your feelings. Did you ever send it?
Yes.
Without telling us what was said, did this get to, is this kind of discontent that led to you to deciding, well, okay, that's it, we're going to be a couple? Is that what you're telling us?
Not in that moment. It was a process over a few weeks.
Okay. But that sort of thing led you, that sort of disconnect or feelings is what led you to be a couple?
I think it sort of started us on the path
Okay.
to be more official.
Okay. So now when you say you and Travis officially became a couple, what did that mean? Was there some sort of agreement, or you sat down and said you're not going to date other people? Tell us about the day that you and Travis became a couple, if you will.
I went out to his house that weekend, well, the first weekend of February. We hung out. We were watching, I don't know if we were watching a movie, we were on the internet, we were just reading books, we were just doing things in the house all day, hanging out. And we were each reading our own books. And we were sitting in this oversized chair next to his bed, just two of us squeezed into it.
Well, let me ask you that. Where were you?
In his bedroom.
Okay. What brought you to his home? And this is February. Do you remember the day?
Not exactly, but it would have been the 1st or the 2nd.
Okay.
Maybe the 3rd.
So you go to his house in early February. Why were you there? I mean, there must have been some discussion about you coming to visit him, I assume. Is that right?
No, there wasn't actually.
Okay. Tell us how you came to see Mr. Alexander in early February.
Well, that month he showed up on my doorstep at 1:40 in the morning without warning. And that's when I met Dan Freeman. And so a few weeks later, I thought I would repay him in kind and surprise him as well.
Okay, before we fast forward back to February, we heard about Mr. Freeman coming to your door at 1:40 in the morning, as you just talked about, and you and Travis went back to the bedroom. Is that accurate to your recollection?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman wasn't in that bedroom. Could you describe for us what happened in the bedroom while Mr. Freeman was outside of the door?
We just made out.
What do you mean, just made out?
It didn't go very far. We were just kissing and playing around and just having fun.
Okay. No oral sex?
No,
No anal sex?
no,
And your clothing stayed on?
yes.
Okay. So after this, a few weeks later, you surprised Mr. Alexander in early February. Do you remember about what time you arrived in the home?
I had to work that night, so I hit the road. I don't remember. I think it was around 2:30 or 3 in the morning.
And you were coming from Palm Desert?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us what happened when you arrived.
I pulled up to his house and I was kind of excited the whole trip. I was like thinking, I mean, he thought it was hilarious when he came, so I thought it would be funny to do that.
Could you speak up a minute?
I'm sorry. But as I approached the door, I had doubts. I thought, I kind of felt stupid. I was like, what is he going to think if I'm showing up at his house at 3 o'clock in the morning? So I started to like go back and forth and waver, and then I walked back to my car, and then I stopped. I was going to get all the way in the car and just go back because I felt silly. But I turned around and looked at the house one more time, and I noticed in the upper window there were lights flashing, like that was the loft where the screen would have been for the television or movies or whatever.
Okay.
So somebody was awake. So I decided, okay, what the heck. So before I could change my mind, I went back to the front door and rang the doorbell.
Okay. And who answered the door?
Travis and Napoleon.
Okay. And Napoleon is his dog, right?
Yes.
Okay.
I could hear him before anything else.
What's that?
I could hear him before anything else. He was
Okay.
barking very loudly when the doorbell rang.
Did Mr. Alexander appear to you to be happy to see you?
Yes, he looked very surprised and he had a big grin on his face.
Okay. What happened after that? Did he let you in the home? How did that go?
He pulled me into the house. It was cold out, so it was February, so I had a jacket on with a hood. And he just stood there, kind of a similar reaction to me when he showed up, just dumbfounded but happy, like what the heck. And then his roommate came downstairs, and Travis yanked the hood off my head and said, "Well, this is Jodi." So,
And which roommate was that?
Thomas Brown.
Okay. So after you met Mr. Brown and he introduces you in the way he does, what takes place?
The three of us go upstairs and get comfortable on the love sacks. They're like giant bean bags. Travis and I took the center one, and then Thomas, I think, was on the other side. He would have been on my right.
Okay. As far as, and now we're talking, I know, late in the night or early hours of the morning, what were your sleeping arrangements in Mr. Alexander's home?
Well, based on the last time I was at his home and how he reacted, I told him it's okay if you want me to sleep on the couch. I'm okay with that. And he balked and insisted that I stay in his bedroom with him.
And did you end up spending the night in the bedroom?
Yes.
Did any sexual activity happen that night?
Yes, it did happen that night and the next night.
I'm sorry, and you said the next night?
Yes.
Okay. What happened that first night?
I don't recall specifics. I just know that we were intimate. The same kinds of things we had done before, nothing different. No, except we did the anal sex briefly, but there was none of that.
Okay. And at this point in time as well, you hadn't had penile vaginal intercourse with Mr. Alexander, is that
No.
right? Okay. And did you stay the next day then?
Yes.
What did you do? What did you and Travis do?
We hung out all day. He was showing me a museum that had come through Phoenix recently. It was called Body World. He was showing me that museum online, and it had just left town. Otherwise, he wanted to go take me to see it, but it was gone. So we just hung out at the house. I'm trying to remember if we left. I think we stayed at the house all day and hung out.
Okay. So you don't recall going out to dinner, going out to a movie, anything like that? Stayed home all day?
No. We might have gone to grab a bite to eat, but I don't think so.
Okay. And I know you talked about you spent the next night with him. That day, did any sexual activity happen during that day?
I don't think so.
Okay.
It was at night.
Okay, so you spend all day there. Are his roommates home?
I don't remember if Thomas had to work or not during the day, but they were home. It was Thomas and I think Aaron Dewey.
Okay. When you were in front of the roommates, did he hold hands with you, put his arm around you, anything of that nature?
No. We stayed in the bedroom a lot, but when we hung out downstairs, if the roommates were there, we were just regular, like friends.
Okay. And I'm not talking from a sexual standpoint, but was he otherwise physically affectionate or expressive with you when you guys were behind the closed doors of his bedroom?
Yes.
So you spent 2 nights there, and you said this is a point in time that you became his girlfriend. What was the discussion then that got you to the point where you were to be his girlfriend?
Am I allowed to say what was said?
Well, did the two of you have a conversation?
Yes.
And what was the subject matter of that conversation?
My dating life.
And during that conversation, did Mr. Alexander express to you his desire that you not date other people?
Yes.
And how did you receive that?
Well, it was kind of a lighthearted conversation. I didn't know if he was joking or not because he was talking about my dating life, but not his. So I looked at him like, what do you mean by that? And then he clarified and kind of laughed.
You mentioned his dating life. Did you inquire if he was dating anyone else?
No, I didn't.
Did he offer up any information that he might be dating someone else?
Not during that conversation.
He did later. He offered him up himself.
Yes, I later found out he was dating a girl named Chelsea around the Christmas time. And it also would have been the time, I think, that I might have been in December, but I'm not sure. It was close to Christmas.
But this isn't something he volunteered to you at the time you were having this boyfriend-girlfriend talk, right?
No.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I think it was near Thanksgiving, actually, that they dated. I can't remember. It was the holiday.
Okay.
But they were separated by the time. I don't know. It's in his emails, so
Okay.
that's fine.
So this moment in time that you became his girlfriend, were you happy about that?
Yeah, I felt pretty good about it. I don't know, we had made a lot of progress over the last 3 weeks because of some things that had happened involving some other friends of his, and he had seemed to really change and better himself, and he was treating me very nicely. And when we became what I believe was exclusive, then it just seemed like the natural next step.
What do you mean by some things that had happened with some friends of his? What do you mean by that? Without telling me specifically what was said.
Travis is, he was a funny guy, and he would make jokes a lot, and he made some jokes toward me that were not very nice, but they were jokes, but still didn't sit well with me, so I expressed that with some of his friends when we were hanging out, and they advised me to...
Objection, hearsay.
It's not being offered for the truth of matter asserted.
May continue.
They advised me to stop dating him immediately.
These jokes, you characterize them as jokes. What do you mean? What would he say to you?
He called me a skank
In front of other people?
in front of his roommate, Josh Ward.
And he thought that was funny?
I didn't react, and he said, "I'm just kidding," very quickly.
He calls you a skank in front of a roommate of his. Why not just hightail it out of there?
We were on the phone, actually, when he said that. We were talking, and then he began to have a conversation with somebody else, so I waited. And then he apologized. He said, "Sorry, Josh just got home." I said, tell him I said hi. Jodi says hi. And I could hear a muffled response in the background. It sounded friendly, but Travis he said, "You're a skank." So I knew that came from Travis, not Josh. And then he said, "I'm just kidding." So at that point, I didn't really know what to say. I just kind of, in a polite way, got off the phone with him. And then the conversation with his friends ensued because I was at their house when that phone call took place.
You mentioned a couple other things. Did he call you other names in a supposed joking manner?
Yes.
I'm going to check. Assuming facts not in evidence. Josh Ford called her a skank. She interpreted that to be for Mr. Alexander.
Judge, that's not accurate of what he said. These objections are inappropriate, Judge. It's not what she testified to.
Restate your question. Overruled.
Did Mr. Alexander call you other names besides skank in a joking manner?
Yes.
What were they?
Called me Pollyanna. He called me porn star.
In front of people?
Pollyanna, yes. Porn star, no.
Okay. And what was the point of calling you Pollyanna?
At the time, I had long platinum blonde hair, and I think because my demeanor at that time was kind of happy-go-lucky, positive, shrug things off if they were negative. I always looked at the bright side of things. That's kind of how I expressed myself. So with that demeanor plus my blonde hair, and he wanted to have braids sometimes, so he gave me that nickname.
Okay. But he would call you Pollyanna in front of your friends as well?
Yes.
You mentioned that he referred to you as a skank, and this set off somewhat of a conversation with some friends of his about how he treated you, right?
Yes.
And in your mind, you said he was treating you better, so you felt as if these issues had been resolved and you were getting closer.
The issue was, like, the can of worms was opened when that happened, when he called me that, and then I voiced my concerns about it. Sort of opened up a can of worms, I guess.
Well, did it open up a dialogue that ultimately led to this resolution, I guess?
Yes, it did.
Okay. So you are early February, your boyfriend or girlfriend, these issues have been spilled out on the table and resolved, so to speak. Are you happy?
That day, yes.
Okay.
It was nice.
When you became his girlfriend, did the way he interacted with you in public, did that change?
Around Dan and Desiree Freeman and I think his roommate Aaron Dewey, yes. But everyone else, no.
Okay. So you're telling us that you felt as it, well, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Was he treating you as a girlfriend in front of these people and not in front of others? Is that what you're telling us?
Yes.
You made the comment that you were happy for that day. Did something change rapidly to make you not so happy?
Yes.
What happened?
He got up. We had been looking at the Body World Museum, and we're looking at all these different, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but all these different body parts, and it was fascinating, just the human body and the structure and the organs and all of that. And after a while of clicking around on that website, he got up and started straightening out his room and doing some things. And I was looking at the website, and some of the things we had looked at, we went over quickly, and I wanted to look at them again. So I clicked the back button, and until I found what I was looking for, and kept clicking back, and then I clicked back one too many times, and I was suddenly in his MySpace account.
And what did you see there?
Well, at first I was confused. I thought, I wonder why he didn't log out. So, I didn't see anything in it immediately, but he was it was the inbox, and the temptation got the better of me, so I clicked on an email.
And was there a particular reason a certain email got your attention?
Yes.
Why?
In early December, one day I logged on to MySpace, and I don't know if you're familiar with MySpace, but the friends in your network, you could see when they're online, because there's a little icon that flashes online now, or online or something. I don't remember. But I saw Travis was online too, so I clicked on his page to wish him good morning or good afternoon or whatever time of the day it was. And I noticed there were a ton of new comments on his page. And they were all from two women, and they were like, I don't know what the computer term is, but they were graphics. It was like graphic art. It was all very flirty, like lips and sparkly hearts and all these kind of suggestive things. So I thought that was interesting because, you know, we hadn't had the discussion yet about moving on or dating other people. This was right before that. And right then I got a phone call from him, and he could see that I was online. And he began to tell me about this crazy experience he had, and it involved this.
Well, let me stop you here just for a second so we're clear. This wasn't after you became his girlfriend. This was a time that you had seen his page previous to that from contacting him, right?
Will you say that again? I'm sorry.
I asked you what drew your attention to the particular email that you opened up the day after you became his girlfriend.
Because I noticed that it was the same girl that, well, because he spun a story about it, and when you reply on an email, it says the RE with the colon, and then if you reply again, it has another RE with a colon, rather than just one. It increases every time the thread gets longer, RE, 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 RE. So I could see this was a long thread, and it was that girl, and I was curious, so I clicked on it.
Okay. And you recognize that girl, and he had described, you said, a prior wild experience that he had with her, right?
Yes.
And that wild experience, was that sexual in nature?
No.
Okay,
Well, I don't know. That's not what he described.
okay. Would you term it sexual in nature?
I would term it more hostile.
Okay. So, moving back then to February of 2007, you're reading this email from this female that was sent to Mr. Alexander. Was what you were reading sexual in nature?
At first, yes.
Okay. So part of the content was sexual. That's my question.
It was kind of flirty, not very explicit, but there were innuendos.
Was there, in the context of this email, was there discussion about them meeting?
Yes.
And was there information related to when they were going to meet or where they were going to meet?
Yes, on the New Year.
Okay. And as Travis's girlfriend, this didn't please you. Is that fair to say?
Well, it didn't make me elated, but it didn't bother me too much.
Did you ask Mr. Alexander about this?
No, not right away.
Okay. And I want to clarify something earlier because you said, you know, you were his girlfriend, you were happy for a day, and something made you unhappy. And now you're just telling us, well, this email, it did make me elated. Did something else make you unhappy, or was it just this email?
There was one other thing that really bothered me a lot more than that email. That email was months before we became official, so it was like, it wasn't, I was a little upset because it wasn't what he told me. So I was thinking, yeah, right. But there was another email that was more disturbing.
And why was that, without going into what it said, why was that disturbing?
It was much more sexual in nature, and it was with a married woman, an LDS married woman.
Okay. And you said it was sexual in nature. Did you get the sense that this woman and Mr. Alexander were engaged in some sort of affair?
I don't know. She lived in Southern California, but they were definitely making plans.
Did you speak with Mr. Alexander about this email?
Eventually I did, but I spoke to Sky about it first.
Okay.
Wasn't sure what to do.
All right. Why not, when you said you weren't sure what to do, why not just break up with him?
Well, part of my reasoning at the time was this was also something that took place a few months back. It was before Christmas, and I was a little disturbed by it made me question what his values were regarding marriage. But I liked him, so I wasn't going to break up with him.
You said you liked him. You were his girlfriend at this point in time. Were you in love with him in February 2007?
I might have been, but I don't recall being in love. I recall having feelings for him, but I don't know that I could say in love yet.
After you left his home as his girlfriend, did you go back to Palm Desert?
Yes.
And at that point in time, well, describe the relationship. You're hundreds of miles away anyway. Are we back to the phone calls, that sort of thing?
Yes, he began to call me more often at that point, owing partially to everything that had happened between his friends and I and him. And so he was a lot better in how he was treating me. So things began to develop a little bit more rapidly.
Okay. You say develop a little more rapidly. You're already boyfriend and girlfriend. What is it developing into?
Well, there was a lot more talk about marriage. We were not engaged. That the subject of marriage was almost discussed from very early on, not necessarily him and I, but he would throw out hypotheticals, if. And then so now it was more like when he was making plans, it was always we instead of me. So it seemed like I was included more as in his future and his and mine.
And based on what you told us earlier, it would seem that at this point in time, being married and having a family was still one of your primary goals in life. Is that right?
Yes.
And in this time period of February 2007, are you still involved in prepaid legal?
Yes.
Actively, or you just have your membership purchase? How would you describe your...
I would describe it as I was very actively involved, but I was not making any money.
Okay. So after you leave, after you leave Mr. Alexander's home, you return to Palm Desert. The relationship is flourishing largely over the phone, right?
Yes.
Okay. When do you next see Mr. Alexander?
We began to see each other about once or twice a month. I'm trying to remember the exact time. I came out to his house again in March, just prior to convention.
Okay. Well, you said you tried to see each other about every other week, right?
He would come out to California on average of once a month, and I started going to Arizona on average of once a month.
So he would either come out to your house in Palm Desert, or you would go out to see him in Mesa?
Yes,
Okay.
until May he came to Palm Desert.
I'm sorry, what was
Until
that?
May he would come to Palm Desert.
Okay. And at this point in time, if I understand you correctly, February 2006, your boyfriend and girlfriend, but you have not had penile vaginal intercourse yet, is that right?
That's right.
When did you first have penile vaginal intercourse with Mr. Alexander?
It would have been April or May. I think May. Pretty sure May. But it could have been April. It was in the spring.
Okay. Apart from these trips back and forth between your two homes, and we heard a little earlier about travels, had you traveled together yet? Just the two of you?
That month of March that I came out before convention was our first, it was the first time we traveled together.
Okay. And where did you go?
He wanted to show me the places that were significant in Mormon church history. So we decided to we flew to Kansas City, Missouri, to see places in Missouri, historical sites. And then we also drove to Nauvoo, Illinois.
What was that?
Nauvoo, Illinois.
And what maybe for those of us who don't know, was there just to begin with, was there something of historical importance in Kansas City?
Not in Kansas City, but that was the nearest major airport.
Okay. To this Navajo, Illinois?
No, to the sites in Missouri.
Okay. So how long a trip is this to be?
I don't remember how many days, but we left a few days early to see those sites and then fly to, or maybe drive to Oklahoma City, where our convention was in the spring.
Okay. And your boyfriend and girlfriend at this time as well, right?
Yes.
Okay. You go to Kansas City. Is there a difference in his behavior in terms of how publicly affectionate he is when you arrive in Kansas City as opposed to when you're back home in Arizona?
He's a little bit more distant. We hold hands sometimes, but not often. And that's about the extent. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes he wouldn't even hold my hand. It would just be like, he wouldn't introduce me to anybody, anything like that.
In Kansas City?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you meant at convention.
No.
Misunderstood.
No. Not at convention in Kansas City. We talked about how he acted like just your friend unless it was in front of Dan or Desiree Freeman or Aaron Dewey. But he acted like your friend, just a friend in public. My question was whether or not when you got to Kansas City and you were traveling together where people didn't know you, did that change?
Yes, he was more affectionate in those cities when we were out of town.
And this trip to these Mormon historical sites, before you drove to Oklahoma City, how long of a trip was that to be?
We hit multiple places in a day and then spent the entire day in Nauvoo. I want to say 2 or 3 days.
Okay. And during these trip to these religious landmarks, and from what you say, and I don't want to assume this, so from what you say, it sounds like there were several in the Missouri area.
Yes.
Okay. And as far as these, you must have spent a couple nights on the road as well, right?
Yes, we did.
Okay. And did you have separate hotel rooms or just one?
No, just one.
2 beds or just one?
One queen-size bed.
Okay. Was there sexual behavior during this trip?
Yes.
Oral sex?
I don't remember the nature of it. I just remember it was not anything different than what we had been doing.
Okay. And was this something fairly consistent throughout the 2 or 3 days that you were on this trip?
I think it only occurred once and during that portion of the trip.
Okay. Now, you talk about going through Missouri, and was the next portion of the trip to fly to Oklahoma, or was there something before that?
No, we went to 3 or 4 different places in Missouri. Then we drove to Nauvoo, Illinois.
Okay. And then from Illinois, you went to Oklahoma City?
Yes, we stayed the night in Nauvoo, Illinois. And then we spent the whole day until it was dark again, and then drove most of the night, I think, to Oklahoma. I remember driving a long time after Nauvoo.
Okay. And you said to convention, that was a prepaid legal convention?
Yes.
And based on what we heard before, it sounds like that was one of the two big conventions of the year, right?
Yes, there were 2 conventions per year, and this one was in the spring.
Okay. And you mentioned, because I think we got a little bit of miscommunication earlier, you said he was acting like your boyfriend on these trips, but it sounded like when you got to Oklahoma City, things changed.
That's correct.
Okay. And describe for us again, so we're clear, how did things change in terms of from a physical standpoint?
I just sort of became, it seemed like I was just another person there. Maybe on a friend, acquaintance kind of level. I wasn't expecting, he had told me ahead of time that convention is crazy and all that, but there were plenty of moments where we were all just hanging out, and he wasn't incredibly affectionate, but there was one time where we were up very late and we were in the hotel lobby, and I was really tired, but I stayed to hang out with everyone, and he put a pillow on his lap and let me lay there, so that was really nice of him. But other than that, he was actually very flirtatious with another woman.
Okay. Without going into the details of that flirtation, you said he was flirtatious with another woman. Was that in front of you?
Yes.
That hurt your feelings?
Yes, it hurt my feelings.
You ever say anything to him about it?
Afterward, after the incident, we ended up talking about it.
In the past, you had mentioned how it was difficult for you to bring these things up to him, right?
Yes.
What gave you the courage or strength to bring this up to him?
I didn't bring it up to him this time. He came to me. I think he knew he screwed up.
Okay. And once he brought it up to you, was all forgiven?
Eventually, yeah, we talked a few minutes. Getting into it again made me cry because it was very blatant what he did, and he was very apologetic.
What about the way he treated you at this convention? This kind of, well, what about this disparity between the affectionate behavior you saw when you were going through Missouri and the behavior during the convention? How did that sudden change to being just going from girlfriend, someone he's intimate with at nights in the hotel room, to just being one of his buddies at the convention?
Did you say how did that?
Yeah, how did that make you feel?
I didn't actually overanalyze it because this was a business convention. Nevertheless, there were couples there that were friendly outside of the business sessions. There's a lot of personal time and hanging out and partying. So I saw other couples being affectionate. I don't mean making out, just sitting next to each other, holding hands. Travis and I didn't do that. So it hurt my feelings a little, but it was very mild in comparison to the way he was actually acting with another woman.
Okay. So when how long was the convention? How long were you two just buds?
The convention lasts 2 days, and there was a breakout. I can't remember this time if the breakout came before or after convention.
Okay. Do you share a hotel room with Mr. Alexander?
Definitely not. We were in separate hotel rooms.
You say definitely not. What do you mean by that?
Well, he explained to me that it wasn't looked upon very well to stay in the same hotel room. Plus, because we weren't married, we weren't going to get the same hotel room. He would stay in a room with a bunch of guys, and I would stay in a room with a bunch of girls, and we would all split the cost.
I'm a little confused then, because it seems like this man had concern about the appearances at the convention, but didn't have any concerns about sharing a hotel room with you a night or two beforehand, right?
Yes.
Did you ever question him about that disparity?
No, I knew that it was a church standard, and I knew that we were going against the church standard when no one else knew about it. But not that time. Eventually that came up between us, but at convention I didn't.
Okay. Do you and Travis, how do you return back to, well, where do you go after the convention's over?
I believe we flew directly back from Oklahoma City to Phoenix.
You flew together?
Yes.
Just the two of you, or were there other, I mean, obviously it wasn't your own plane, but I mean, were there other associates or friends that were involved in this trip?
There might have been other friends on that flight because tons of people go, but not that I recall. We booked those flights together and it was just us.
Okay. When you get back from Oklahoma City, do you spend time with Travis, or do you immediately go back to Palm Desert?
Trying to remember. I believe that night we got back on a Sunday, and he used to go to dinner at his friend's house on Sundays, and that Sunday I went with him.
Okay. Did you spend more days with him?
I believe I stayed Sunday night and then left Monday.
That Sunday night before, well, let me ask you this. When you went to the home of his friends. Had you met these people before?
No.
Did he introduce you to them as his girlfriend?
No. I was kind of just a friend.
Did that hurt?
If it did, I was ignoring it. I can't recall thinking anything particular about it.
Okay. That evening, you go to this home and you're introduced as his buddy again. When you go back to the home, is there more sexual activity?
The night before I left, I really don't recall on that night.
Okay. Judge Breps, it's about 3.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to take the afternoon recess. Please be back in the designated area at 3:20. Please remember the admonition. You are excused.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ms. Arias, you may step down.
Thank you.
Counsel, please approach.